How Not to Sail, sponsored by Latitudes and Attitudes. They ruined my life, so why not let them ruin yours today at latsats.com. So it's day 5 of my solo sailing trip from St. Pete to Miami. As always, if you haven't heard the previous episodes, I encourage you to start with episode 1. But today I have 5 days left to make it 190 nautical miles around the southern tip of Florida to the Miami Boat Show to promote this podcast. I still don't know exactly what the podcast will sound like, and I only have one interview recorded so far, but I have my promotional postcards printed out and I'm headed south. Yesterday, I sailed and motored from Cabbage Key to Marco Island, where, as our friend Kira will be proud to know, I promptly ran aground at the exact same spot as last time I was here, trying to tuck into a little curve of the beach in front of the hotels. I was no more successful in staying out of the waves than I was in not running aground, but at least the bottom was sand, and all I really needed was a place to crash, so to speak, before today's great leap forward. Today I have to make the jump about 90 miles south, at maybe 6 miles an hour, from Marco Island, past the Everglades and down the empty stretch of ocean to the Florida Keys, dodging the shallows north of Marathon Key as I head toward and through 7 Mile Bridge, and finally, hopefully, into Marathon. What could possibly go wrong? So it's 11:38 a.m. We're about 19 miles off the Everglades. If you look at a map of southwest Florida, or the show notes, you'll see how just below Naples and Marco Island the land curves inward toward the east. If you're looking at a satellite view, you'll see that all the condos and hotels and houses and streets stop. That's the Everglades. You can see where the Everglades are by the layer of cumulus clouds over to our left. And then they just end about 30 miles off our port bow down at Cape Sable. I've discovered that 18 miles south of Marco, cell service stops completely for the next 10 or 12 hours. And I like it. As you pass Cape Sable, the land reaches out again, but not close enough to see. The last chunk of Everglades hides over the horizon, 8 or 10 miles away. And then you're in no man's land between Cape Sable and the Keys for another 3 or 4 hours. The depth never gets more than 30 feet, but it feels like you're in your own world for almost the entire 15-hour crossing. Although there's the occasional reminder. There's nothing visible on the horizon 360 all around me. Except the damn crab pots. When I woke up today, it was 60 degrees out. I had my hoodie on as I hoisted the staysail and main and weighed anchor. As I departed Marco Island, I unfurled the jib and enjoyed the beautiful sight and sounds of making 4.8 knots toward Marathon and only 7 or 8 knots of wind. But the 15-hour jump would take almost 20 at this rate, and I needed to charge the batteries, so reluctantly I cranked up the Iron Jenny after a half hour. As Bob Bitchin said in episode 1, the longer passages are where you get most in touch with nature and yourself, or something like that.
A crossing to me is what sailing is about, because what people don't realize is when you're out there cruising, the only thing you're thinking about is what's for lunch. You're just either reading a book, or if something goes wrong, you're fixing it.
By 10:30, I'm already thinking about what's for lunch. But lunch doesn't actually happen until 4 hours later. Time for a steak lunch in the middle of nowhere. On previous crossings here, both the Admiral and I have gotten plenty in touch with nature. Just ask her about the time lightning struck within 1,000 feet of us when we were the only metal thingy sticking up from the ocean for miles around. But the only hazard I figure I'll encounter today is crab pots. About 20 minutes after noon, I bonked my head on the boom for about the millionth time.
Oh, that hurt. You'd think I'd know it's there by now.
And I had to throw the autopilot into standby and steer around a crab pot dead ahead.
20 miles out, there are crab pots, like a minefield.
If I haven't mentioned it yet, crab pots are a regular feature of Southwest Florida.
Here's another string just 15 feet off starboard.
Just north of the Keys, they're ridiculous. Because the seafloor off the Gulf Coast is so shallow, they extend miles out, even past the 12-mile international line.
It's just crazy. We're 20 miles from land. I don't know whether I want to eat a lot more crab or never eat crab again. Sorry, buddy. I seem to have startled a water bird.
When I say crab pots, I actually mean the little round styrofoam floats that are attached to a stone crab or lobster trap on the bottom. The little floats, or buoys, are 6 inches or more wide, often bright red, orange, or white, or some color that doesn't look like the ocean, and usually have some code of letters and numbers written in magic marker around the equator. Just like on Deadliest Catch, they're laid out in strings, and somehow most of these strings of pots will be laid out along your path, where you have to keep putting the autopilot into standby and steering around them, instead of across your path where you could cross them one time and be done. I still haven't figured out how these fiendish crabbers know which way I'm going to be going. The problem with these things is not the buoys, which are just the visible part that make my blood pressure go up and make me jump for the autopilot standby button, but rather the line about the size of a small ski tow rope that connects the buoy to the crab or lobster trap on the bottom. This is the part that wants to mate with your propeller and wrap around the prop shaft like a Chinese finger trap, which is a bad thing. Imagine you're the 30-horsepower diesel engine going about your business turning the prop shaft at 2,000 RPM when suddenly that prop shaft locks up. At the very least, your engine is dead in the water. At worst, you may have just signed up for a new engine. I've heard of engines breaking away from their mounts because of a crab pot. So when I see the crab pots, the first thing I do is curse. And then I steer around them. Maybe just slightly above crab pots on the list of things to avoid is navigating in shallow water at night. I'll be doing both today. But speaking of things to avoid, another one of those things is ticking off your sponsor. So it's time to pay the bills for 30 seconds, and I'll be right back.
Smooth seas and blue skies.
Bob had a problem. You see, Bob had a magazine. And then Bob ran into some trouble and lost his magazine, Latitudes and Attitudes. But guess what? America's #1 boating lifestyle magazine is back again as Latitudes and Attitudes. Check it out today at latsats.com.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the story. The cruising magazine that I got into cruising with, Latitudes and Attitudes, transformed into Cruising Outpost after Bob Bitchin got screwed over by a very unscrupulous fellow who shut down their offices and moved to South America. Or something like that. But now they're back as Latitudes and Attitudes, and we are super happy about that. And don't forget, be sure to check out the show notes for this episode at hownottosail.com/6. That's the number 6 for photos, the script and ship's log for this episode, and all kind of stuff. Maybe even a map. Oh. Meanwhile, today is going to be a long day. Hopefully peaceful, possibly relaxing if I can make enough speed to sail instead of motor, but long. This 15-hour great leap forward between Marco and Marathon will probably be the longest leg of the whole trip. As the afternoon wears on and I approach the Keys, there will probably be even more crab pots. And by evening, it'll be time to navigate the maze of shallows, and by which time I won't even be able to see the crab pots anymore. And then there's the bridge. I remember the first time I tried to cross under 7 Mile Bridge. At night, of course. It was my very first trip, and of course I was by myself. I'm not sure what possessed me to just leap straight into a 190-mile solo trip, but I learned plenty about how not to sail. One of which is, engine power is a good thing to have when transiting through large solid structures like bridges. And another is, if you're blind as a bat like me, it's good to make sure you can read the chart plotter at night. Tonight will be different, of course. I've navigated 7 Mile Bridge several times, and the shallows that extend miles north of it. What could possibly go wrong? By the time I finish my late lunch, it's officially hot.
I have no idea what the temperature is, but I'm going to say 80. Not a breath of wind. My iPhone just gave me a reminder that says time to work out at the gym.
As I was cleaning my plate, at least a half-dozen dolphin came and played at the bow.
I got out my melodica to regale them with the rendition of Jethro Tull's Wind Up, but when I came up they were gone and the music didn't seem to bring them back. Or maybe it ran them off.
The dolphin may be gone for now, but there is other sea life about.
Bonefish just skittered by on the port side.
And of course, there are the crab pots.
And there's one 20 feet to port.
By 5 o'clock, I've had almost as much fun as I need today. I've lowered the mainsail. All it was doing was making the boom squeak back and forth.
Just under 2 hours left to Bullard's Bank now. I've pushed the throttle up to 2200 RPM and we'll see how she does. There's a strong smell of something in the cabin and the cockpit. I'm going to keep an ear on it. I'm getting a little antsy now. I'd like to be able to get into Marathon Marina, or at least anchor south of 7 Mile Bridge before it starts blowing from the east.
It's already showing the first hint of the east wind, and by sunset I've closed the hatches and port lights and changed my wardrobe a little.
Well, a lot can change in a little bit of time out here. I've gone from shorts and burning up to having my foul weather gear on. And still dodging crab pots. Hopefully I'll get to the channel at Bullard's Bank while there's still a little bit of light left after sunset, and maybe I can avoid dodging so many crab traps and get down to 7 Mile Bridge and get south of that, where I'll be in the lee of the land, hopefully, before it starts blowing.
By 6:30, I'm just 12 miles north of 7 Mile Bridge, and I'm looking for lights.
Let's see, red 1 second. Where's green? 4 seconds. I don't see green.
The shallows extend for miles north of Marathon Key, and I need to make sure to find the channel entrance at Bullard Bank. My chart says, green lateral beacon number 17, having green flashing light with a period of 4 seconds and a range of 4 miles.
I don't see the green light on Bullard Bank yet. It says visibility 4 miles. We are 3.7. See a red light, and there's no flashing red light on my chart that I should be seeing. Seems like this happened before.
This is why you don't do this at night.
I see a green light. It's further to the right than I would expect. Need to be careful to find that channel. It gets pretty shallow here.
Finally, I spot the marker.
Okay, that's it. 4 seconds. Green light.
So I'm in the channel, but it's narrow, and I still have a dozen miles through the shallows to the bridge. And in the dark, there are still crab pots in the way.
Oh, look, another crab pot in the middle of the channel.
I've almost got a fatalistic view about the damn crab pots at this point. I've slowed down a little to 5 knots and just hope I don't run over one. The tiny sliver of moon isn't helping much, but the stars are magnificent.
I can see the traffic on 7 Mile Bridge. And a whole load of stars.
Finally, 14 hours after starting out today, I reached the ruins of the old bridge just north of the new one. It was part of the railroad line destroyed in the hurricane of 1935, which at the time was the only way to visit the Keys other than by boat.
There's the red lights that mark where you pass through old 7 Mile Bridge. They've removed the center span there because it was too low. The first time I came through under sail by myself, I thought those looked like the gates of hell.
Now I'm through the old bridge and almost home free. But wait. Under the center span of the current 7 Mile Bridge, the span that I need to pass through is something. I'm kind of starting to wonder if I'm going to make it through the gate this time. But one thing's becoming clear to me. It's about time for a good old-fashioned cliffhanger. Be sure to join me next episode to find out just what happened under that bridge. And with your help, maybe I'll make it into Marathon, which is a very nice place. Big thanks to everyone who's left the nice 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and elsewhere, and everybody who's jumped on the email list. I couldn't possibly be more grateful. Don't forget to visit the show notes for this episode at hownottosale.com/6. You can find the notes for any episode that way, and there'll be plenty of scripts, maps, pictures, and Lord knows what else. You can also get in on the Facebook group by just going to hownottosale.com/community. You can also catch me on the Twitters at hownottosale and on Instagram at Bradford Rogers. I sure appreciate you listening, and I'll see you next time on How Not to Sail. Screwing up is part of cruising. Let me show you how.
Enough of crab pots already.